And we're back with some wall tactics, here to talk about the stats and the facts going into the rise of the green tide. So, as you all know, the data slate has been out, and now it's been at least a month, so I can actually go into the Goonhammer stats and do a faction versus faction little analysis. Always we'll go over Meta Monday as well, look at the Orks percent win rate, and then go over 3 lists today of the best performing Ork players, or a couple of them, and just talk about their matchups and the strengths and weaknesses of their list. So, starting with the Goonhammer faction versus faction Orc. So, if you've been paying attention, we know that this used to be Death Guard at the very, very bottom of our win rate and Astra Militarum. Now you can see Imperial Knights is actually fallen up or fallen down into one of our harder matchups again. They did get only a couple point reductions, but that did add a whole nother night. And I think what it did is add more of their player base to the community. I think they started coming out a little bit more, knowing that they can kind of mess up sometimes Custode players. They have decent matchups into Tyranids. They have decent matchups into some Catan lists. I'm sorry, Catan lists, some Necron lists. And in reality, the main component of this Imperial Knights list is going to be Camus Rex. He's a slapper. He's a clapper. Dude gets off. His strength 14 weapon just claps. His melee claps. Everything about him is really good into Orcs. Him on his own pretty much holds the faction up against us to a certain extent. Adeptus Custodes, this is not going to surprise anybody. They have just about every rule over us, other than more models, I guess, right? The mission comes into a huge factor. Something I'm going to show you on Meta Monday is what does play a factor into the Custode matchup. Like I always say, is actually mission dependent. And Meta Monday kind of reflects that. We'll talk about that in a second. Black Templars coming to the forefront. I think just more Black Templar players are being played. And I think that's what it just really what it came down to. I think all the Space Marine players just realized I have no other way to play, and they started adding. A lot of them will play Gladius. Even Firestorm Assault is pretty nasty for Black Templars as well, so be aware of that. Death Guard. I don't really think that the win rate they've actually gotten too much harder or weaker in the matchup. I really think that their lists are changing because they're trying to figure out what works into everybody else. It just seems like they're not as popular as they were earlier in the maybe like 2 months ago or so. We know that they're Terminator bricks and Mortarion kind of matchup in these certain lists. Maybe the Chaos Sorcerer and Terminator armor is pretty good. There's a bunch of different abilities they can stack there that makes them a hard matchup, but it really does come down to how they built their list. Astra Militarum is getting a surge where they're just performing very well. They were our hardest matchup. Do I think it's gotten any easier? No. I think what happened was they started to get more tools and play slightly different. And some of them go for less infantry and less screening. Some of them might bring just like one Bullgrin squad, or they might try to reserve too much. And I think that hurts them in a matchup against Orcs. But if they play correctly into their strength with a lot of scouts and good multiple units of Bullgrin, that'd be still a very hard matchup. Then we got Leagues of Voltan, Tyranids. I'm just going to ignore GSC for a little bit because it's just, well, not ignore, it's hard to say for them. And I just say them at the same time. Adeptus Mechanicus and Gene Stealer Cult really come down to, do they have the potential to be you? Yes. Does it come down to a very high skill player to do it? Yes. Does it come to a certain skew list? Yes. And then we have Leagues of Voltan and Tyranids. So Tyranids are struggling as a whole as a faction, but into Orcs, they have all the proper profiles between Maleceptors, a bunch of damage 3, making us take battle shock tests and failing battle shock, reducing our strat capability, getting +1 to wounding in some of our tough characters can be quite annoying and troublesome sometimes. And I don't think Evasion Fleet being able to pick, I'm going to give lethal to the infantry or vehicles and monsters, whatever they need. That's a good rule to have into Orcs because it goes into either one of our skew match, like build archetypes. Leagues of Voltan. I think it's just Orc players aren't familiar with them and get caught off guard with the firepower and the amount of vehicles they can have. It's if you run a skew that's good into what they have, you're going to get rolled by them. And if you have enough tools and board control, then you don't. What surprised me here was actually Chaos Knights being right there at the 50-50 mark. This is typically a bit of a harder matchup, so I don't know exactly why this is where it's at. We'll keep an eye on this things go forward. And then Thousand Suns, as we see Chaos Marines, a couple of the Grey Knights sitting there at 55, 54%. I'm just going to call now as the Grey Knight list start to change and go towards Dread Knights. That's going to be a bit harder of a matchup for us because they did get a surge this last weekend, and I can see them continue to climb as they're one of the few factions that I can actually, like, in the same way kind of deals with Necrons and some of the other tough matchups that we see. And then, as you can see, that I want to point out for us is Necron sitting at a 61% win rate in our case. Orcs just have all the tools to one-shot Catans, fully delete Necron melee units or Necron kind of stat checking units, and then in response, Necrons don't have the proper output a lot of the time to clear our units fully, and they just kind of run out of assets in that way. So it's good for us that, you know, we can still predate on some of the harder factions in the game. You know, you see there may be a little bit of Space Wolves. We still have a good advantage over Chaos Demons and World Eaters. We still have some decent play into Blood Angels, Sororitas, Necrons, Tau, and Tau has actually been beating up a lot of the meta bullies. So it's funny that we end up beating them. It comes down to the order of who you play against, what faction, what mission, and where in the tournament you end up. So if it's a local league, know that this is what's coming, but also know that we do have tools, because as you can look through this, Orks are almost, give or take 5%, 50-50 across the table into so many different factions. There's so many other determining factors for where we're at, right? But if you look at Meta Monday, which is what we're looking at now, the stats are showing that Orks have again gone down in our win rate. We lost another 5. We lost another 2%. And then our 2%, I think maybe this might have even been 52% at one point earlier. So our win rate's slowly just dropping and dropping and dropping. I'm truly a believer that straight up comes down to some of the skews, like Custodes being so much more popular, high-level Necron lists, even though we can beat them as a whole. Some of those really high-level Necron lists can catch an Ork player off guard and end up beating them just because we don't bring the tools. You can go to like a skew, like a triple monolith list or something. You just don't see it coming. And what I was talking about earlier with Custodes is right here. So on Meta Monday, they're pretty much saying, I'll just give it a highlight right here. He says another point of interest is Mission 0, Vital Ground Crucible Battle beats a serious problem for Custode players. Out of 22 at Cherokee, 15 of those players lost that round, including the top 3 players. I found 2 other events running that mission in the weekend. Overall, Custodes had a 39% win rate on Vital Ground. Now, why is that? It's a 4 objective mission with nothing in the middle. That means the Custode player has to split their forces. They can't get easy access to the objective control, which meaning not only us as Ork players, but other factions can kind of parse them out, keep them off the objective a bit better, really put damage into them, and still continue to score primary, knowing that those relatively slow Custodes are not going to make it over to them and help to the support side. So it's not a coincidence that they lose that matchup. I always say that the mission's a big factor when going into Custodes. 6 objective missions, if the player chose tactical or fixed. There's so many different factors into why Orks win or lose into Custodes, but we do have the capability to beat them within Gaz. And Nobz is a bit of a help, but there's so many factors into that. I just wanted to show that's where Orks are at. With the 46% rate is dropped again. It was at 48. It was at 52. Continue to drop about 2% every week since the data slate. And I don't think it's going to get that much lower. I think we're going to stay somewhere around 45, 46 until GW starts to kind of handle Necrons and Custodes and kind of bring them a little more into line. And Imperial Knights, it's always going to be a bit of a hard one because they're a weird skew that, depending on how you build your archetype, they might just hard counter your archetype. So it is what it is. One thing I want to give is a shout out to ECOP for 5 gifted wall tactic memberships. Very generous of you. Greatly appreciate you. Always love you get. We appreciate you very much here. Make sure you guys collect it, because I see you in the chat looking like a Umi, not a green dub turned into a runt or a squig. I'm gonna know you didn't collect that membership. Whoa, for Jay Hoon, also doing another 5 wall memberships. So I appreciate you so much. You guys are super generous, and it means a lot. You know, it helps us for how we got another monitor here. We did our raffle. The banner behind us comes from all these donations and all you guys assisting us. So very, very grateful for that. Thank you guys very much. And then we'll look at the chats in a second, but let me go over some lists, because I have some lists here, right? So as I go into the chat, I'm gonna take a look at the chat real quick before I enter the list, but I have 3 lists. First, we're gonna start with Frontline Gaming Cherokee's Grand Open 40K champ. So let me see what you guys got to say in the chat before I run up. We got the whoa from the chat. Let's go, Joe. Let's go, Jay. All you guys were early. Wicked Joe. Appreciate you gets. Let's see. He said, I just tuned in and highly appreciate the effort you put in for us gets. Whoa, yeah, that's what I'm talking about, boy. I appreciate you too. The whole purpose of this channel is really to bring the Ork community more to the forefront, more cohesively. That way we're all like on the same page and have an understanding. Not to make us super competitive faction, but to make us a bit more of a competent faction. And kind of bring up to us being, you know, casual, but still having fun as the whole time. As long as we play the game correctly and fairly. First time catching it live, you get, whoa, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you're here and you got to join us. Be sure to ask me any questions, anything you got in mind. So I'm all good with that. I go over the list, and then in between going the list, I look at the chats, and then after I go over each list, I go back to chat and answer what you guys got to say in response. We doing any special when we hit 2K subs? Not sure about that. We should yell at David about that. Maybe. I've been wanting to do like a longer stream, so maybe we might have to do that one day. Going over Mandos, not today. That's Friday. Friday stream, we're gonna be going over Mandos. I took them to GT, and so I just wanted to go over how I felt like they did and where they're at. Member for we got our 1 month member chat. So if you guys have this, you guys are a member, look to see if you get your free chat. Love the work, keep it up. Whoa, for Jesse Hart, let's go. I appreciate you. I'm glad you used that shout out. I'm glad you used that chat, man. That's really fun to see. I'm glad to see those because you guys get to give a big whoa. So Frontline Gaming, you guys are all very familiar with this. A bunch of different channels talked about this. It's pretty much the biggest event of this weekend. I'm not going to get all eccentric on here. Let's just look at the Green Tide list. One thing I'll point out, that this last game being a 0 is not a fluke or anything. He did concede / drop this round. The exact reasons are not exactly known, but he did actually drop from there. But his results before that were magnificent, so we're still going to go over his list. So going into this list, he says 9.41, I guess. So we got Beast Boston, Squeakosaur, Gazghoul, Captain Badrock, Mazrog, Knob with Wall Banner, Follow Me Lads, Warboss with Cunning but Brutal, Weirdboy. One small 10-man unit of Weirdboy, a big brick of Weirdboys, only one truck, followed by one battle wagon, Flash Gits, 33 Gretchen, because we like to run those 3 10-man units, Mega Nobz, a 3-man unit instead of the 2, and then 2 Warbikers. Very slim list. It is what we like to call the Sean Naden archetype, as he was the first one to bring it out. Mind you, at Cherokee Open, they were using player placed terrain. In player placed terrain, if you didn't know, you guys roll off to see who goes first. The person that gets the ability to put a piece of terrain first, has a great ability to dictate the conditions of the battlefield, because they can just place it somewhere near the middle, whether to put a small piece of terrain in the middle, that way they get a huge firing lane, or a large piece of terrain, that way they can actually stage. One thing I did know and I heard is that they changed it from it being you can just place it right in the center to you have to offset 4 inches from the center, I believe. So that did change the conditions of the battlefield. So just know going into this, it was player placed. The person did understand it, because you have to be a high level player to use this correctly. I'm not a fan of player placed terrain, but I have been an LVO and tried this too. So I knew exactly what the strengths are when you have player placed terrain. So let's go. His first matchup was Thousand Suns, which is another faction that low-key getting a little bump up again, right? When Eldar just got kind of smacked off the map a little bit in CSM, you can see some of these other factions that are trying to come up and actually get some love back. And I think Thousand Suns is one of them. Now that they can get close enough to close the distance, Magnus can't just get shot off the table so effectively from CSM and from Eldar as much. I see them going, hey, we can bring it back now, y'all. So we have Exalted Sorcerer and Disc of Zeech, Infernal Master, a Thousand Sun Sorcerer and Terminator Armor, Armin and Zeech, and then Magnus to red. We have 2 units of 10 rubrics with flamers. I believe they have flamers. Yep. Yes. And then a 5-man unit, and then a 10-man unit of Zangors, followed by a brick of Terminators and a Zangor Enlightened squad. Now, not the most refined list from what I understand, but I am seeing people starting to ring Terminators again, so we'll keep an eye on this as we go forward. It was the first round matchup. We know that the first round matchup sometimes can be, hey, the player could have just fine of a list, but then they're not up to the skill level necessarily yet. Mark did put 100 points on that, but we're going to keep an eye on Thousand Suns going forward as they're kind of making a splash again. So let's look at his second matchup is Tau. Tau is one of those factions that is also getting kind of coming up to the forefront, but that's because they have a great gameplay into Space Marines, into Custodes, whether any version of Power Armor, Space Marines, Tau just handle them as a whole. So we know what that's like. So we have Commander Farsight, Commander Shadow Sun, and then a Coldtar in a Commander Battlesuit. Exemplar of the Caillou, that just means that they can use their army-wide ability 1 turn sooner, which means they get Sustain 1, and they're spotlighted to Sustain 2. So we get Crisis Suits, a larger unit of Crisis Suits, Ghost Keel Battlesuit, a Piranha, Riptide, Skyray Gunship, Stealth Battlesuit, 2 Tetras. This looks like a pre-data slate list besides the Riptides. They don't have as much, we'll say, transport infantry as people would like to use. and as much infantry just for kind of holding the middle as these other factions or these newer tile lists do. And it runs these Sky Ray gunships. So it's not the most prime or like ideal in the current meta, but the Riptides are magnificent. He might have just brought this because he knew it was going to be LVO terrain and he was hoping to just make a huge gun line. I know a lot of people are doing that when they will go to LVO. They're like, hey, I get a bunch of open lines of sight. I'm just going to gun you off the table, get. So we have the third list is Thousand Suns again. That's why we're going to keep, mind you, next week going forward, we're going to keep an eye on Thousand Suns because they might just shoot up to the top here soon. Their output is amazing, and people don't have really the defense to deal with that. A lot of other factions. So we have Armin, Exalted Sorcerer, Inferno Master, Magnus the Red, and then Thousand Suns Terminator and Armor again. Sorcerer and Terminator Armor again. Rubric Marines, a 10-man unit, one 10-man unit, 2 5-man units, the Mutilated Vortex Beast, the Terminator Squad, and the Zango and Lighten. You can see these lists are easily 1,000 points of characters. This comes down to the Thousand Suns player being very proficient in when they allocate resources and pretty much targeting whatever can kill Magnus and trying to kill it first. He did only get a 79-point win here, so I wonder what the mission was. As his fourth game, this was his lowest scoring mission. And why that is possibly because it was Eldar. So this is one of the new Eldar kind of archetypes going forward. They still bring the Avatar of Cain, but something else they brought here, we'll go into it. So we have Artark Wayleaper, the Farseer, and Avatar of Cain, and then Eldred Uthray. 2 units of Shadow Specters, a Warlock Conclave, 2 units of Warspires, 2 Wraith Lords. So those are their version of Dreadnoughts, 2 support guns with D cannons, and then 2 walkers. So what's odd about this, or what I found is interesting about this, is you have the Warlock Conclave that can either go to Ulthred, Ulthray, or the Farseer, right? So I think that really is it might be matchup dependent. I'm not really seeing the exact utility of this. I looked over the data sheet. It gives like -1 to wound and some other things. It's really, they're all just like 1 OC. I'm not 100% sure. I probably missed it. Maybe someone in chat or whatever can tell me. But Conclave is making an appearance. It can go into either one of these characters. And then the Wraith Lords. Wraith Lords are just kind of cheap for what they do. They give you Bright Lances. They give moderately good damage and decent durability. The mission could play a huge factor in why the scoring was this. But like always, you do got to be a little bit careful. The Warp Shot Fighter shenanigans to get into your backfield super early. The Farseer can pretty much get in your backseer early as well. He would be being able to move, advance, shoot, and then fire and fade and move again. And that might be why he takes the Warlock Conclave, because he might just double move onto one of your objectives and be able to auto-see you or just kill you, whatever on there. And then the Warwalkers that are just cheap to get up to the front with their scouting and their weird durability. He did have lower scoring, just depends on what the mission was, so we'd have to look into that more. His 5th game, he got 100, which was going into... Don't worry, guys. I also look at the chat right after I go over this, so don't worry. We have the Splinter Seed Assault Force. You guys know that's a new one. It's a new one. Archon with the Nightmare Shroud, Archon, and then Lilith Express. Cabalite Warrior, Witches, 1, 2, 3, 4 Raiders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Venoms, Incubi, Reavers, Scourges, and then Talos. So in my opinion, whenever I go into Drakari, the issue is when you're a not durable elite army, sometimes as an orc player, you have to understand that your objective into another, let's say, elite army is that you're not going to try to take primary early in the game. You're just going to deny enemies primary by staging and then taking your chunk of flesh off the primary when someone goes to stick to it, right? They put what they consider a durable unit there. You crash into and destroy it, or you tag the objective with like a Death Killer War Trek and some bikers or some grots. You're looking to deny primary. And then later in the game, once you've taken enough of their assets, then you start to beat them down and take primary, run away, because you're constantly throwing secondaries at the same time. Drakari want to do something similar. The issue is we do have units that can actually hold primary when they commit. And when they do commit, they're just getting picked up in response. Flash kits are super great answers to them. And then they don't have great ways to deal with Mazrog or even a Death Killer War Trek with the Feel No Pain, Beast Boss, and Squigosaur. Our ability to fight in death, to trade out whatever their most killing unit is that's throttling, like this Lilith Hexbrass one or this Ankron, just becomes really hard for them. So they pretty much get no primary. whenever I played with them, because whenever they try to do that, you usually have something that can counter and then stage and then go punch them off the objective, and then sometimes they can't take you off the objective, so then you just smash. The last game he actually played was into the same person that he conceded to, which was the same person that actually won the event, which is Thousand Suns. So very interesting that he actually beat that player and then conceded in the next game. I think they were just a disagreement on rules or something, and he didn't want to, do anything complicated, so then he just dropped. So this is the Thousand Suns list that did go undefeated, or not defeated, that won the whole tournament, that did lose one, which was to this Ork list. So we have Armand, Magnus the Red, Exalted Sorcerer on Disc of Zeech, Exalted Sorcerer on Disc of Zeech, and then Infernal Master. This looks a bit more like we're familiar with. 2 bricks of rubrics, 1 small man unit rubrics, and then 2 units of Zangors. Very interesting. 2 units of Chaos Bond and a Mutalic Vortex Beast. Those last 5 units, I guess the Mutalic Vortex Beast didn't catch me off guard. That's a good unit for like reserving, coming outside the table and just annihilating someone with shooting. But double units of Zangors and then 1,000 Suns Buns just caught me off guard. And this really came down to the player knowing his meta, knowing how to utilize player place terrain, because there's nothing exactly spectacular about this list. A lot of time it comes down to the 1,000 Suns player really knowing how to manage their resources and when to attack you and kill your most killing unit, and then sticky Magnus in your face and being like, haha, you messed up. So great job to Mark, even though he did drop that last game. We'll take a quick look over his list again. Beast Boss on Squigosaur. Something I'm personally finding too is that I love my Squig Hog boys with a knob on Smash Squig and the whole big unit. The thing is, enemies are packing a bunch of anti-damage a bunch of weapons that are at least damage 3 or 4 because they're taking into the custodes, right? So a lot of the time they're going to chip down your Squig Hog boy units. You might have a difficulty delivering them because they're going to move block you. And then when you do get into combat, they do have the ability to punch you out. Compared to the Beast Boss on Squigosaur, that now gives you the delay road blocking capability, can go toe-to-toe with some like kind of cheap, like a Tyranid monster or a Wraith Lord, and stand there toe-to-toe with them and eventually chop them down with Edwappa's Kill Choppa. So he becomes a dual-purpose tool where some matchups you're just lowering someone down and getting in the way. Maybe you're counter doing a heroic intervention to stop enemies from piling in, getting enough fights into a unit that you don't want to die, or they're actually able to kill something for the same point cost of under 200 points, let's say, some Tyranid monsters and such. So Beast Boss Squigosaur is getting a bit more interesting than me as well, because I noticed that in my matchups too, where I'm like, my Squig Hog boy unit's been diminished, but if it was a Beast Boss and Squigosaur, I probably could have kept the pressure up and not been so worried about the enemy's offense. Then you have Gaz, which we all know we love Gaz for actually Makari's lethal. That's the true value in Gaz. Captain Bradrock, always going to bring him going forward, at least to the book codex drops. And then Mazrog. See, people normally say Beast Balls plus Gaz plus Maz is too much. I disagree. Now with Wallbanner, follow me, lads, because sometimes you just need those extra 2 inches. And then Cunning but Brutal, that way that big unit can fall back and charge, because a smart player will understand if I charge the side of that 20-man unit of boys with like a Rhino, they're not going to break my Rhino. If their knob isn't anywhere near it, they're not going to get Power Claws attacks in. Boom, you're not doing anything. But if you can fall back with that unit and still charge, now you're dealing with a unit that can steal OC. A lot of the time, you'll do the wall banner before your actual wall, or even if you do it after your wall, the issue is the enemy knows I have to allocate to killing this right now, because then these boys are going to fall back, charge, auto-see something, the war boss, the knob, and then the knob that's leading the unit have enough of a punch that you're actually still going to demolish something that's trying to hold an objective if that unit's not one shot. So it's not that your 20-man unit of boys can't die. It's that the enemy now goes, I really have to kill that right now. And so everything goes into that while the rest of your army was forward. The 2 Weirdboyz is just secondary scoring. This allows you to pick tactical or fixed and feel better about it, because the Weirdboyz can mind, oh, I'm going to go here and deploy. Oh, I'm going to go here and deploy. I'm going to go over here and cleanse. It allows you to kind of do that a bit more freely. And you could take the 10-man unit of boys with you in case you want to stick it in someone's backfield. Like, I got my boys back here. So I really love to see that. Truck, wagon, flash kids, bunch of Gretchen, because a lot of people want a deep strike. Everybody wants to come in within 3 inches. Hey, Gretchen, just make a nice little T-bone maneuver, or a nice, what people call a wishbone, etc. And you can just screen on your backfield so good. Oh, you got a 3-inch deep strike? No, you don't. Boom. So I love that. Couple unit of extra bladed wounds on Maz, and then 2 units of war bikers without the Death Killer War Trike. That's fine. Bikers are fun for what their durability is. The fact that they can do assault sorry, that they can have assault means they can advance and still do a secondary, and they have just enough OC, what makes it fun. So great job by you. I really love the list. It's similar to Sean Nathan's list, but just kind of modified a little bit for the terrain and for the secondary game. So before we go into Kyle Pearson, I'm going to look at what you get to say. So ask me a question. What you guys got to say? We got Tracy is a new membership. Whoa, Tracy, let's go. I appreciate that. So, yeah. Player place terrain allows you to have runes to set your grots in and to do teleports every round. Yeah, exactly. Player place terrain allows you to play the game in a completely different manner. And I'm not going to say if it's good or bad. I just know it's very different, and to each their own. Yeah, in WTC you have to expose yourself. And on GW terrain, there's a good amount of the time that the objective's going to be in the open sometimes too, or at least partially in the open. 20 boys follow me, lads. Yeah, I love that. I love that, to be honest. Do you think this list was more fixed or tactical? I think because it's player placed, it was like, I'm assuming it was like 50-50 in reality. A lot of the time it's matchup dependent. Like at the GT I went to, as soon as I seen it was Imperial Knights and the objective mission we were doing, I go, I'm going to do fixed. But then if I see another matchup, let's go like Leagues of Voltan, I'm like, I kind of want some more OC. I mean, I want some more CP and I kind of want more board control. I'm going to go ahead and flex into getting that. So I really think the best orc list actually understand that having the flexibility to choose either or is the best way to go, because then you're not like stringent in your game plan, because orcs are never stringent. Did you ever take fixed? Yeah. Take against tile players. Exactly. It's really matchup dependent on when you would want to bring fix. Sometimes it's just so direct where you're like, well, you just gave me 2 free ones, or you gave me a bring it down and a cleanse, or a bring it down and deploy teleport homer. Like I said, in his list, on the list we just looked at from Cherokee, he had double Weirdboyz, which gives you a good flexibility for doing fixed. And then the bikers still give you do fix, because then you're like, oh, I'm gonna do homers, oh, I'm gonna do cleanse, one or the other, I'm saying. And then I'm gonna do, well, really in reality, you do cleanse and deploy homers, because your Weirdboy can go deploy the homers, and then cleanse can be done by your biker, your truck, your wagon, your grots, etc. And then still, if you play tactical, you can still choose to do very similar secondary capabilities. When the buns are we getting our codex? Whoa, I know, right? I think GW be lagging, to be honest. They like to wait a lot of time. Oh yeah, this that DE game was streamed. Yeah, that was streamed. I didn't even get a chance to look at it. I told myself I wasn't, and I got lost in the sauce. I wish I had those extra 2 inches. So is my forehead. Had an Orks versus Ork matchup left. Learned a lot. I like how we need more transports. I need more transports. Yeah, transports help a lot in the Ork on Ork matchup, which is funny you say that, because this Kyle Pearson had an Ork on Ork matchup. So let's take a look at his list real quick. We had a Death Killer Wartrike with Super Cyborg Body, Gazgul Traka, Captain Badrug, Mazrod Scragbag, Knob with Wall Banner, Warboss. A 20-man unit of boys, 2 trucks, a battle wagon, flash kits, 2 units of Gretchen, a 2-man unit of Mega Knobs between kill sauce. Hey, shout out to you. 2 5-man units of what we call the Scalpel unit, and then just 1 Warbiker unit. So this is, again, the Sean Nathan archetype, but we know he was actually not in America. He was actually in New South Wales. So I'm just showing that there's a different part of the world, and they're still showing that that archetype, the Sean Nathan archetype, still works. Do I think I still like the 2 5-man units of Nobz, as we've seen here? Personally, no. Because outside of the WAAAGH, you're not killing what you need to kill for that point cost in trade, unless it's like power armored Marines. So I'm still running just a big man unit of Nobz, and I think a lot of people out in America still are too. But I can see why he brought it, because this was a Sean Nathan archetype, and he kind of looks like he directly was inspired, we'll say, by that, right? So let's look at his matchups real quick, because his very first matchup is these nuts. It was another Ork matchup. So we have a Ben Tinker, we have Wartrike, again, Gas, Captain Badrock, Mazrock, Nobman Smash Squig, Pain Boss, and a War Boss in Mega Armor with Follow Me, lads. A 20-man unit of Snagga boys with his Pain Boss. 3 trucks, a Battle Wagon, Flash Kits, 2 units of Gretchen, Mega Knobs, another unit of Mega Knobs. A 5-man unit was with the War Boss and Mega Armor. And then a small unit of Squig Hog boys. I personally do not advise just running a small unit of Squig Hog boys with the Knob unsmash a squig necessarily, but I know why he did it. He did it because that's getting closer to that point cost where I can run into something that's 185 points, 165 points as a vehicle, aka or a monster, aka Screamer Killer, and possibly punch it out. It's just that when you're leading with that lesser amount of volume, your squigs, your mounts are still wounding on 5s, most monsters and vehicles. For the most part, you're still not getting that exact tool that you need. Kind of how I feel about the 5-man unit of War Boss with Nobz. The Pain Boss, though, with the Beast Snagga boys, I like that because instead of paying for the Beast Boss, which is 40 more points so he can get dev wounds and +1 to hit, you pay for the Pain Boss. That way you can absorb a little bit more Overwatch. You can bring some boys back to life. And in reality, Makari's lethal and their innate rerolls are really what you use to punch out Katans or monsters or any kind of vehicle unit. Therefore, you don't necessarily need the dev wounds. What you need is a little bit more points and a little bit more durability. That way you can actually fit in that full 20-man unit or whatever, let's say like a 15, 16-man unit, right? So I actually do like his lips. Not terrible by any means. This comes down to who got to play the terrain, who went first was a factor, and how they utilized their transport was a factor. I know Kyle Pearson is actually quite a good player because we've covered him. It's been several months, but we've covered him before. So I know for a fact that he's actually quite an optimal player. A lot of the time when it's an orc on orc matchup, who goes second matters, and the War Boss themselves is also a factor too. So here it was a 62-point win. That was his lowest score because he was very hesitant, I'm sure, to deal with that. And it's funny because they had like kind of similar lists. So as his second matchup, I actually have notes on this one. So for his second matchup, he lost to Tau. And as you've seen earlier, and we did faction by faction, Tau were actually one of our easier quote-unquote wins. But that really does come down to the mission and how good and proficient the top player is, because he knows your army. He knows how to allocate resources. He knows not to throw his whole shooting phase into Maz and waste it. Stuff like that, right? So let's take a look at this boy's list. Because you already know it's a Triptide. So he has Commander in a Koltar battle suit with the exemplar of the Cayune, Commander in Crisis battle suit, and then a Commander in Enforcer battle suit. And then we have a Dark Strider. Don't worry, I have a couple notes here that we're going to look at what these guys actually are. A Breacher Squad, a Breacher Squad, a Breacher Squad, followed by 2 Devilfish, a Crisis battle suit, a Pathfinder unit. This is a version of Infiltrator Scouts. And then, of course, triple Riptide, and then 2 Tetras. That way they can get their sustains a bit off easier, right? So right here, we're going to talk about what the heck is a Dark Strider, right? So let me get closer to this. There we go. You guys can actually read it. So Dark Strider, little epic hero get. He goes with Pathfinders, which he showed earlier. He gives Jammer Array enemies that are set up within 12, cannot come in 12 inches of this model. So that's pretty much a anti-deep strike reserve capability. And the fact that they have infiltrate and scout 7, plus they move 7, means that they're going to take up that corner of the field where you're going to come in from your reserves if they really want to. And they get +1 to their range attacks add +1 to wound on their range attacks. So this is the Pathfinder team. So the Pathfinder team will bring a couple ion rifles, and then they'll overcharge them if they're intelligent for that damage to -2. And then they have their pulse carbines that are strength 5, so they're getting +1 to wound on you. And then orcs don't have the best armor save, so the fact that you can actually put a little bit of volume into us can be a bit of annoying. But what's more annoying is the Grav Inhibitor Drone that subtracts 2 from the charge rolls, even though it's not accumulative. And this, once per turn, after using the greater good ability, you can select this unit to be Observer unit for the second time. So what that really means is that's stacking with the Exemplar of the Cayune, because what's happening is he's going to spot that unit, and then they're going to get Exemplar of the Cayune 1 turn earlier, which means they're going to get sustained 6s, and then they're going to get sustained 2 if you're spotted. So that Pathfinder team with that character allows them to find the position, choose to put you down, and then stay just far enough away, just staged enough away that you're not going to reliably charge them. Or if they have to, they can use that to move block you too. I don't know exactly how they chose to use it against orcs, but that was the combo that I seen there. The other thing is, let's take a look at these crisis suits, because this is always going to be a factor. Auto moving 6, having good durability and shooting potential with good volume. This is a unit that is definitely devastating if you have a unit of boys and then they're overwatching you. Just because they're going to know that you're where you're going to be going. They're going to take a great line of sight on you, and then they're going to overwatch you and try to dwindle down that unit of boys or snaggas that you have. So because your unit's so big and these guys are so mobile, that they're going to find that. And last but not least is the Riptide, in case you're not familiar with it. So the Riptide is quite cheap, like 165, I think it was on there. Look again. Do it, not cheap, maybe 185 at the most. 165, right? So the Riptide has twin-linked plasma rifles. Okay, so not many shots, but it has them. Remember, you can get sustained on this army. And then it has the ion accelerators. So a good amount of shots coming from that as well. It can fall back and shoot, even when it's tagged. Typically, you want to tag towel players, and then, you're stuck. Well, they can fall back and shoot if he has to. Even though he doesn't necessarily have to, because none of these weapons are blast, but it helps if they fall back. And then you can choose to make his weapons devastating. And he ignores all modifiers to his hit roll. So he's still hitting on his normal capability, which is important for him, and his devastating wound potential. So if the towel player rolls hot enough, he's putting a bunch of 3 damage weapons into you, and that can actually end up swaying the game. Because he scored so well at 84, I'm wondering if the towel player went second and then just scored at the bottom of the turn by scoring like enough, maybe primary at the end or an enemy outpost, which those crisis suits have the capability to run around the battlefield if you can't engage with them, even if it's only a couple of them, and scoring that late game for you even. So not that surprised by that, because you can almost kill like the entire army, and then the crisis battle suits can run away at the end and if they go second. And that's the only reason I can think of how he lost that game, to be honest. So his third matchup was against my favorite doggy boys, the Space Wolves, with the Stormlands Assault Force. So we got Bjorn the Fell-Handed, Logar Grimnar, and Stormrider. So he pretty much thinks he's an orc like always. He does his own version of the wall, where I believe he like re-rolls charges. And is it +1 attack? No, I have to look at it again. I'm sure someone else knows, like David. So we have a Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf, Wolfguard Battle Leader, and then a Wolfguard Battle Leader on Thunderwolf. 3 of those. And then Wolflord on Thunderwolf, Wolflord on Thunderwolf. We have Assault Intercessors, Eradicators, Infiltrators, Scout, 3 units of Wolfen. Love to see that. Not going against it, but as a person that loves the idea of what Wolfen are, which are essentially just hairy orc boys, that's pretty dope. And then 3 units of Cavalry. You can see he went full into his skew. He didn't really care to have much shooting. The only shooting I would even advise to a Space Marine player that's playing this skew is just bring Eradicator, put him in reserve. You have 2 scouts and then just a couple Wolfen units, because the Wolfen units help deal with the problem that these dudes cannot get through terrain and infantry. So if you're going into this army, just keep in mind that 1, they can turn 1 charge you. So make sure you have your order of your grots in the way or whatever it may be. That way they can absorb the charge. Because mind you, these guys lack guns as a faction so bad. Because they're advancing and such, they're not even going to really shoot you with anything. Wolfen don't have anything worth a gun. I know it shows a gun, doesn't matter. So really, it's funny because into this faction, whenever I found myself looking at it or playing against it, take your grots, put them in front of everything else, and run your grots at them, run your bikers at them, run your storm boys at them, fill up those lanes, start move blocking them, and then knowing that the Wolfen can be the only thing that can come, you can deal with them as you wish, or even disembark your flash gets earlier and use them as a nasty overwatch when those Wolfen pop their heads out from terrain. So orcs do still have the tools to beat that army, but it is still a very formidable army if you do not play it correctly. And then we have his 4th game, which is into Custodians. So the mission, like we always say, matter, but let's take a look at this. We have Blade Champion, Shield Captain, Trajan Valores, Custodian Guard, 2 units of Alaris Terminators, 2 units of Warden, Witch Seekers, Cladius Assassin, Evisor Assassin. The only thing that caught me off guard is that they didn't choose to opt into a bigger unit of Terminators. That can be somewhat problematic for orcs as a whole. He only has 2 units of Wardens. That's cool. Let me see what the character. Evisor, Cladius. Okay, I mean, College Rex is a bit better sometimes for them because they can go with the Guardians, but that's cool. 2 units of Blade Champions, though, I'm not really seeing that. I'm not sure if it's worth it. Usually just a straight 3 character seems to be good enough. But this has all the tools that the Custode player can play with. The one thing that I feel like they would miss, though, is the Alaris Terminators. A big brick of Alaris Terminators does help in that orc matchup for them. So when they don't have it on their list, that's great. And of course, the mission really does come into play greatly. Having a big unit of boys can actually out OC you if you just run onto an objective and not choose to not charge them. a lot of them choosing not to charge Custodes and kill them is a better and smarter way to play them as an Ork player, and hope that they either score poorly on their secondaries or they pick poor secondaries like a fixed or something, like a poor fix that they can actually score. But great job at him, because you've seen Orks are actually having a hard time with that. Then on his last game, we have again Custody. So we have Blade Champion, Shield Captain, Trajan Valoris, and then Valerian. I know Valerian, he gives an Armor of Contempt, and then he can auto, I think, make a nice 6 or reroll something like that, right? 2 units of Guardians, 2 units, just 1 unit of Alaris Custodians, 3 units of Warden, very impressive, and then the Venatari squad. A bit surprised at the Venatari squad. I personally would be more interested in seeing those points into a larger unit of Custodian Terminators, because the uppy downy movement helps for the fact that they're freaking slow, right? And it also gives a weird kind of like volume of shooting between their grenade launchers, and then they have rerolls against leaders and leader characters and vehicles monsters. Oh, he said, I believe Logan reroll hits in melee and charge rolls once per game. I faced them on a list. They put a lot of pressure with the speed and high volume attacks. There we go. That's what it was. I said +1 strength. See, I thought he was an Ork. But yeah, this list is totally fine too. I think they just opted for a bit too many characters, because they already have an issue with like model count and like unit count. You could use all those extra points between Valerian and the Blade Champion for just more units, more Terminators. Make it a 5-man unit and then a 2-man unit. That way you can drop would be more difficult. So when you see something like this, understand I really only have to kill, for the most part, the Terminators and these Guardians. And then the rest of it is just walking up to them, getting in the way, hoping that they can't score their secondaries and maneuvering them. And then I would kill the Venatari too if I could. I found that most of the time I can kill them. It's the Wardens that pretty much give you that unkillable feel. But if you're smart enough to throw the Grots up the field, the Death Killer Warstrike up the field, Storm Boys, stuff to get in their way, that definitely affects them greatly. It just, are they smart enough to shoot that away, right? Or do they even have the volume of shots to shoot that away? Which, when they last Terminators, they lack that capability. So, Cal Pearson, shout out for the war, getting in the top 10 at your GT. Congratulations, going 4-1. I appreciate you. You get, and we've seen you before, so you will not forget. So before I go into the final Ork list right here, I'll look at the chat real quick. But this was in Amsterdam, New NL. I should have looked up what this was. Now I look like a Neanderthal. Sorry, guys. This is in Europe pretty much. Ha. I'm so smart, right? So let me take a look at the chat real quick. Let me see what you just got to say. No. When are we getting a Codex? I wish I had those extra 2 inches. Don't we all? And an Ork versus Orch. Matcha did a solid game. I will watch that game, especially if you guys send that in the Discord. Let me know. Yeah, well done to Mark. Well done, Tiny Goods. Bikers, dinosaurs right now. As in, who would I rather bring? A 3-man unit of Bikers or a 3-man unit Squighog Boys? I think if you're gonna bring 3-man units Squighog Boys, bring like 2. It's not that I think 1 is necessarily bad. It's that when you pay that extra points for the nom, then it becomes like, ooh, it's not really that cheap anymore. For 125, enemies have a hard time dislodging it. When you make it 185, it becomes worth dislodging it. And then for the Bikers, though, Bikers just seem like an auto take, and a lot of the time, because the amount of defensive capability they have, the fact that Death Killer Warstrikes are coming to the forefront, and they're so cheap, makes it so like they have more utility. And I'm trying to do fixed. I'm trying to do tactical. Either way they work, either way they help. So I really like my Bikers, because Bikers have pretty much not let me down at all. Much appreciated. The channel gets a lot of credit. I played my first game of 10th in December and had my first game with Orks in middle of December. And the channel was a huge for learning my army so quickly. Well, thank you. You get out. That makes me happy, because that's exactly what we're here for. It's funny because one day I'll do my hobby nightmare story. Shout out to Northern Exile. But I'll do my hobby story. And what happened was I started Orks because so many people quit Orks when I started at the local games workshop I was at, that I was pretty much offered like 1,500 of Orks, 100 points of Orks, because nobody wanted to play them. So that always put something in the back of my head, that our faction is loved, but very difficult to play, very difficult to learn, especially if you're a new player, because you see all these other cool people with power armor, taking saves, shooting people at far away. They're getting involved in their game for the first 2 turns right away. And as an orc player, you're just like being taught you must stage, you must be patient, you must learn movement and shenanigans, you must learn piling and consolidating correctly, you must learn resource allocation before you can even start winning games, even on the casual level sometimes. So it's a big deal. Long story short, it's a big deal that this channel exists just to make the baseline of the orc layer community just feel a bit more confident and play a little bit more clean. That way we can just have a little bit better of a credit than, hey, they just like to have fun, because we do, but orcs have fun when they're actually crumping you and you no longer into wall and you use your wall banner ability. Does Makari give lethal? Oh, and that's funny, because what you're asking is, if you use a knob with wall banner and you're within 12 inches of Makari and it's not your army wide wall, do you still get the wall potentials, Makari's lethals, to your knob wall banner unit? From what I understand, and from, I believe, LVO did this too, yes, you can. You still get it as long as you pop the wall banner correctly, like you're not outside of a transport or whatever. Just make sure you do it correctly, as in you're already out of the vehicle. You pop it, and then you get within 12 inches of Makari. Most people still rule it as yes, you still get it. I would ask your TO if you go somewhere, because one RTT I went to, the TO said no, but everywhere else I've been said yes. And it's funny you say that, because on the recent list I made a knob unit with wall banner specifically because I want to run into someone on my non-army wall turn, and I want to pop crit 5s for lethals, and that offsets the fact of the war boss +1 to hit, not on the wall, because I'm getting 10 more attacks, but I'm getting lethal 5, 6s, which makes up for the fact that I'm not getting +1 to hit from the war boss, and the war boss attacks himself. So yes, it does take a little bit more technical skill set up with your knobs, but in reality, it's pretty devastating still. And I'm gonna try it out, because I want the idea of us going second and having such huge disadvantages bothersome to me. And I sometimes want to either continue momentum or just start right off the bat and throwing something with the knob wall banner into you, having the enemy forces on that, and then the army goes into it. So great job. I mean, that's exactly how I feel. Oh, dude, funny you say that. Patiently waiting for your Dreadwall detection. Me too. I got 3 Mecha Dreads I'm trying to use. I got my Morkanaut, my Gorkanaut. I got my Kill It Can set up. All that stuff's painted up. Well, the Mecha Dreads are. And I'm ready to go with the Mech Wall. I just want to run that stuff. Whenever I look at my Mech Dread, I'm like, dude, what the heck is that? Well, I use 210 points. Can't pop Knob Banner and Transport, but it does proc Makari lethals. Exactly. Don't do it correctly, guys. We did the Transport video. And that's something that we definitely tell you. Keep that in mind. You cannot pop your knob wall banner while you're in a vehicle. I will disembark him behind terrain just for that reason, because in the following turn I want to pop it and I want to eerie go. I play a lot better since I switched my ganja for the right. I'm sure that was a factor too. Oh, bro, I'm Mark Cameron. Oh, dude, there you are. Whoa, dude, you were a beast mode out there, that VO boy. I don't know what happened. Maybe you hit me up in Discord and we could talk. If you join our Discord, it'd be great if you join. We could talk to you. You don't always have to be competitive. You can just have a chat with us. We have a great time in there, just being lovely gits. Everybody in there is super friendly and super open-minded to anything you have to say. So feel free to jump in, Mark, and get stuck in with the Great WAAAGH. And great job, dude. Sad that last game you didn't get to play it, but you did prove that you beat that guy already once prior, which is still very impressive. So great job, dude. Your list was freaking cool, and I appreciate the double weird boy, because you just try not to roll that one. You're like, I get one chance. Don't roll that one, weird boy. That's what happened with me. I stopped using the weird boy because I got scared of rolling ones. So we're gonna take a look at the last list, which is Ruben. Which he did lose. He did go 4-1, but let's take a look at his list with the chonks, is what he called it. So he got the Beast Boss on foot, 2 of them, Captain Badrook, Nobz Rise, Cragbag, Nobbins, Smash the Squid with Edwappa's Kill Chopper, and then a War Boss with Follow Me Lads. 2 units of Beast Snagga boys, 4 trucks, Flash Kits, 2 units of Gretchen, 1 unit of Nobz, 1 big unit of Squinkhog boys, and 2 units of Storm boys. This looks like a very typical pre-data slate list, which I think still has a bunch of viability, because these beast bosses still run around with their dev wounds and beat the crap out of you. And this is the only list we covered today that didn't have gas, which is fine. And it does have the Nobz Smash Grid with Edwappa's Kill Chopper and the big unit of Nobz, like I like to call the Scalpel unit. So this is a list that we've seen. I've run myself. He only put kind of brutal on here because he just ran out of, like, he just had the 15 points left over, and to let people know, like, this beast boss is going to fall back and charge you again and get dev wounds again, means that they're just like, oh no, I have to kill them. They have to kill that guy. So sometimes just letting people know, like, this dude's going to keep coming and keep momentum. When you can force enemies to shoot at what you want them to shoot at as an Ork player, or at least you know what they're going to shoot at, that's your power as an Ork player. To understand the enemy won't understand real resource allocation or how much it takes to kill me. Therefore, I hope he overinvests and doesn't have enough left for what I have left. That's what I call him. He said that ain't no scalpel, that's a chopper. Okay, we have his first matchup with his Gene Stelacots. Primus, Reductus Saboteur. You know, this is the guy who throws mortals pretty much. Acolyte hybrid. Are these the same size? All right. 1, 2, 3 units of Acolyte hybrids. 1, 2 units of Neophyte hybrids. A pure strain Gene Stealer unit. Okay, I see you. Achilles Ridge Runners. And then what the heck? He has a allied force of 3, 4 Catachan Jungle Fighter units. That means he wants a scout. And then triple Chimeras with 1 Torox Prime. The Chimeras are there because they're actually quite very efficient transports, guys. For 70 points, 5 more points than a truck, way more durable chassis, way more killy chassis, dope armor save. It's just that the guys inside of it suck because they're not boys, right? So this is a not meta army, but you can see, list, but you can see what his idea was. Is I'm going to take the middle of the table, keep you off me, put my little spawn marks things in there, and then you're not gonna be able to come tag them because as an Ork player, if you run up and tag those, they can't spawn there anymore, which just devastates them. But Ruben ran that over anyways because that's how we do. Now in his second matchup is Eldari Craft Worlds. Let's see what these gets looking like right now. So we have Artark Wayleaper with the Howling Banshee, man. I was kind of surprised about that. Death Jester, Avatar of Cain, Lilac Night Spear, and a Solitaire. 1 unit of Rangers, 1 unit of Swooping Hawks, 2 units of Warp Spiders, in a Wraith Knight, 2 Vipers, and 2 Warwalkers. Very odd list, as you can see from here, guys. And that's just how it is sometimes in other parts of the world. This is why I always say know your own meta, because I can know exactly what's being run in America, almost guess my opponent's list before he even tells me what it's running. What it is. That doesn't mean that applies to everyone generally across the world or even across America. So always take what I say and apply that I'm telling you. Know your meta first and apply what applies to you, and whatever does it, throw it out the window. And his third matchup is World Eaters. Ooh, we got Angron, Jackals. I like the Jackal. But the only thing I really like about Jackals is that they get sticky objective. 1 unit of typical 8-bound, and then 2 unit of exalted 8-bound. One thing I think is always overlooked is that these guys give you a reroll 1 to wound aura, which feels magnificent. Chaos, World Eater Chaos spawn just gets a 4 feel no pain, and then 2 Khorne Lords of Skulls. These guys are awesome with their firepower. With Angron as well, you're like, here's my alpha charging, then here's all the meat. Can you handle it? Can you dig it? And Orks are like, yeah, for sure, we can dig it. Don't worry about it. And then they literally dig it and they beat you up. Really love that. World Eaters used to be like a much harder matchup when they didn't take such a huge nerf. Like what I call the Master of Indirect with the Berserker Glaive. He would just chop through like any Ork unit. You'd have to fight on death against him. But us just being able to fight on death hurts them as greatly. Like they just hate to know that we can reliably fight on death. So always keep that CP management in the bank when you're fighting World Eaters. Always remember that they do struggle to destroy your transports besides a triple Lord of Skulls or double Lord of Skulls. But for everything else, it comes down to you as an Ork player knowing how to manage your resources. The fact that Ruben had multiple beast bosses on foot means that he was able to just run down Angron and punch him out. And then everything else was killed, and I'm sure the Lord of Skulls came last. Then his actual 1 loss came to, not surprisingly, no offense, the Chaos Knights. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So we have a Stalker, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Brigands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Carnivores. So he still brought a good amount of Brigands, which we hate to see, especially Ruben hated to see because he had 4 trucks. And then this Git had 4 units of Nurglings. Now, I will say it really comes down to how good the Chaos Knight player is, because Nurglings can double mess you up as an Ork player. 1, he can use every one of these bases to just get in the lanes that you're going to be in as your quad truck list with Nobz, and just say, if I go first, I'm going to walk about 1 inch away from your deployment zone, and I'm going to hold you there. That's one. Or two is that he goes, well, point for point, you can't reliably kill a carnivore with anything other than maybe like a Moz on the charge, right? But I'm saying you're not reliably point for point killing anything without an overcommitment, which means like a beast boss on foot with a beast Snagga boy unit to kill, let's say, 1 carnivore. That's not an equivalent point trade, which means you're getting destroyed on that. I'm killing you. I'm possibly popping that truck early and killing that too. But if you do try to go into me, if I place a Nurgling there, let's say you take a 5-man unit of Nobz and a war boss, and you try to run into my carnivore, and I place a Nurgling in a rune, he has an aura of -1 to hit, which means now your war boss is going to come there with his gits hitting on 4s, especially down the wall. You're not going to kill that carnivore. And then now you've just lost that trade as well. So Chaos Knights have the tools to really mess you up as an Ork player, but it does require the Chaos Knight player to understand your weaknesses as an Ork player and then manage that, right? Another thing they get is they can run through terrain. Typically, Ork players, we're happy to try to move block units who we don't want to deal with. The fact that they can run through terrain to get lines of sight on you and pop your trucks with their brigands or charge into you with their carnivores, super annoying. For 1 CP, they can do it to 2 units. And the fact that they get tougher if you start failing battle shock is a big deal, because Orks do have the capability to fail battle shock. So that's something I'd really like to see in our codex, is more abilities to ignore, deal with battle shock. Because Orks shouldn't be so scary, especially when they're around a bunch of other Orks. And then, so he did lose that one, kind of devastating, 41 points. And then last but certainly not least was his final game, which was against the Gene Stealer cult again. So we have, and Gene Stealer guys, if Gene Stealer cult, if the guy's a good player and you're playing on a certain kind of terrain, like not too crowded, he's going to jump in from the table edges and just do devastating amount of damage to you. Bah, bah, bah. And then he's going to go back and spend these guys and then keep doing it again and again. But I only seen him like once at an event I went to, and then to play them. So we have Jackal Alphas, 3 Primus, Sanctus, Acolyte Hybrids, a smaller unit. One was a small unit. 2 big units, a Neophyte unit, a hybrid unit, hybrids, another hybrid unit, Achilles Ridge Runner, and then again with the Pure Strains, 3 units of Pure Strains. That's because they want to keep you off them, and they just want to have actual capability to punch you, not just shoot you off the reserve edge, right? This is again where Orks being able to just run up the table in their trucks. You pop my truck. Hopefully, I disembark away from you. Even if you take a couple of my gets down, I'm going to run into you and pick up these bricks of Neurophyte hybrids. They hate to see that. They hate to see Orks, because Orks are one of the armies that are like, I'm going to punch you off the objective, push you back into your deployment zone, and then continue that for the entire game until you're literally nothing. I just think we are actually a hard matchup for them, as long as the players familiar enough with their rules. So shout out to Ruben. Whoa, for going 4-1. I appreciate you get. And losing the Chaos Knights, it's not surprising in some ways, in some matters, in some matchups. So again, a little recap. Orks sitting at a 46% win rate. It's going down from 48, as you can see. Not surprising in my opinion, just because a lot of our predators are coming to the forefront. But to keep everybody happy, just know, for the most part, we're sitting at 50-50 against a lot of different things. I would really say, if I had to pick our top 4 most reliable and annoying matchups, it would be Imperial Knights if they're running Canis Rex, Custodes because they have every advantage just in combat phase, Death Guard because if they're a good Death Guard player and they're playing the proper list, they can stack -1 ballistic skill, -1 weapon skill, and -1 to hit. And then the Astra Militarum if they're playing triple Kazarkin and a double tank commanders, a Manticore, Basilisk, multiple Scout Sentinels, they can start stacking ridiculous indirect, where they could be hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s because they're going to get orders, and Scout is going to help the Scout Sentinels and help them, and then they're going to reliably pop your transports and then hit them with the Basilisk. So even if they don't kill you, they reduce higher movement. The Kazarkin are going to scout up into the middle of the table and then give themselves double orders if they need to continue to move around and be annoying. Does it take a high-level Astra Militarum player to really deal with Orks as a whole? Generally, yes, because they hate to be touched. But as other guard players, I'll say, or effective players are starting to get more popular with them and show the success, I think the guard community is going to catch on and start to play a little bit more up to par. Because a lot of the time they're kind of like us, where we're like, we just want to have fun. Whoa, right? Like I'm at Ork Butt at my GT. Shout out to Ork Butt. And my boy had a gargantuan squig off. He didn't care what the meta was. He brought the same list. And my cousin was walking by his table once at like another RTT, and Orkbud drew 2 cards, and he was like, I can do both of these, but I'm gonna charge. Whoa! And then he ran in, right? And that's nothing bad about Orkbud. He's fantastic. He won Best Painted Army. But I'm saying that's what we're known for as a community. And Astro Meltarm kind of looks like that too sometimes, right? Where they're just like, I'm gonna shoot you with everything. Oh, and then they're like, wait a second, I didn't consider the fact that you're gonna clap me back right now. So let me take a look at real quick what you get start to say. Daggers with the wall for daggers. Daggers talking about gargantuan squig off. My get is sending my gargantuan squig off to me. So I'm going to be taking that to RTTs too. And at Adepticon, I'm going to take it to Adepticon. So any of you gets here, just know I'll be at Adepticon. If you want to play a game with me and or David, let me know on either Facebook or Discord. Let me know who you are and your name. That way I can schedule it. That way I can play multiple games with multiple of you gets. I will most likely bring something somewhat casual, but if you want something a little bit more TV, I'll bring a couple extra points in my car or something to give you a more interesting matchup if you really want. But I'd really like to run my gargantuan squig off just because there's going to be so many people there. I don't want to be carrying a lot of stuff. So we'll be at Adepticon doing a meet and greet on Wednesday, talking to you get. So let me know where you guys are at. And then we got our Amazon affiliate link, so you guys can go ahead and start using that for your battle forces or whatever forces you're choosing to collect and increase in your army size. Of course, that affiliate link works for anything, not just Warhammer stuff. And Orkbud is an amazing painter. Yeah, he is. And he's a really nice guy. And he was very happy and friendly when he seen me. And he subscribed to the channel and everything like that. So shout out to Orkbud, because one day if he ends up in the chat, we got to give him some love. So, guys, how do I feel about Orks right now? I think, especially at an RTT level, we're looking great because it's so easy to miss those couple annoying matchups and then just have a solid, fair, direct game plan into all these other factions that we have a good chance of winning. And that kind of reflects the community as a whole. And as for a GT level, I think what we're seeing again for we'll say about at least 3 weeks in a row since the data slate, Orks have a hard time going straight up undefeated. They might tie, right? But they actually have a hard time going straight up 5-0, 6-0. That's why when we seen Mark Cameron's list, I was so interested in it. But the fact that this player does play a factor for everybody's food for thought. So I'm still sticking to, as a whole, Orks do struggle right now with going 4-1, 5-1, because there are just a couple armies that are super good into us. And if with not the correct mission to favor us, we struggle into them. So yeah, it's just that Ork players are just keep having fun, keep playing how you want to, because we're gonna get our codex. We have no idea what's gonna be the next awesome detachment. So like I always say, stick to the basics of 40k when you're playing Orks. Understand movement, understand piling and consolidates, understanding charging through ruins and how to avoid overwatch, how to tag enemies with your trucks. That way that unit cannot overwatch your not infantry unit that's charging into them. Understand your CP management, not popping artist nails whenever you're targeted across the board. Understanding how to stop strategic reserves and how to screen. The basics are what's going to lead you to victory as an Ork player. I promise you. And that's really what makes this so interesting when you see a good person win with Orks, is because you understood that he had to utilize the basics of the game to win. Because like Art of War said, we play a very fair and direct game of 40k, and we probably do it better than you. Oh, and we have another one right here. Sorry, I put in there. Gifted 5 wall member tactic memberships. Whoa, the Wicked Joe, like always supporting us. I'm gonna see you at Adepticon, Wicked Joe. Give you that shirt. Wicked Joe's gonna be one of the first people I play with, because he already let me know we're gonna play a game. Either me and him or me and his wife, whoever it may be. I'm down to crump them goods. And you know, this comment made me even more. I moved away from the mic. This comment was even more interesting by Mark, because Mark is the one who said, I played the first game of 10th and ever with Orks in mid-December, and he did that well. So that's really you. I mean, of course, thank you for giving us credit by any means. That's very nice of you. But you, at a good player, had to understand player place terrain as well. So good job to you, Mark. I appreciate you giving us love. Of course, hopefully you show up on Discord and give us some love in return and start dropping some of that War Boss knowledge. Showed up late. I was diving. All right, he gets. And we're going to be diving too, because I got Helldivers too, and I'm ready to get stuck in with you gets. But there's always one thing to keep in mind. Is don't cross the wall, because we not get teeth out. Whoa!